say some things.
Hello. Adventure.
Love.
Connection.
Risk.
Passion.
Evolution.
Play.
Life. The Archetypal Tarot Podcast. Provocative mythology for the 21st century.
Aloha, listeners. This is Julienne, and we have some big news for you. Things are changing up around the Archetypal Tarot Podcast. Don't worry, we'll explain. It'll be cool. And stay to the end of the show to find out how you can participate. And here we go. Hi.
Hi, Julienne.
Aloha. Have you been?
Happy spring.
Happy spring. It is spring. Spring has sprung.
What does that look like in Hawaii? Is it just like even more beautiful, same beautiful? How does that happen over there?
Well, considering we had a really, really rainy, cold winter, like January and February was super rainy and actually pretty cold for us. It does feel like spring. Like there are more butterflies than usual. It's now in the low 80s during the day and still kind of cool at night in the 70s. But I can feel it. And, you know, there's a few humpback whales left out there, but they're pretty much all on their way back to California and Alaska. So,
oh, good.
Yeah.
Send a little message with them and maybe they'll bring it to me.
Yes, they are actually. I just heard that they had to pull up all the crab pots for the Dungeness crab fishermen because too many whales get caught in it. And they were basically like, nope, pull up all of your nets and your crab pots until they've had a chance to migrate past and go up to Alaska. So
that's right.
The time of life.
We will see some whales here pretty soon in Pacifica. It's a gorgeous day here as well. We've been getting lots of rain. It's just like rain on refresh button every week, but the beautiful result is just greenery and sunshine today. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, you guys need the water in California for sure.
Yeah, we got it this year. We got it. Good.
And yeah, we're pretty green over on my side of the island, which is typically the dry side. But honestly, I can't complain. I did a beach day yesterday, which believe it or not, I don't do very often, like at all. I just go to the beach, swim, and then come home. But I actually went and hung out with some friends at the beach. And yeah, I've never had better teachers in my life than just the island itself, the water. You know, it's a great place of learning as well as being. I'm into it.
I love it. Well, I'm so glad that we could schedule this conversation today and talk about a really big moment in our podcast.
It is. I know. Should we have like a drum roll or something?
Yes.
Change is afoot. Change is afoot at the Archetypal Tarot Podcast. So, do you want me to just start it off and then I'll hand it to you as appropriate?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
The podcast is going through a change. We're growing up, we're growing out. And just to be completely honest, I think both you and I, Sara, we have at times, because it's coming up on 8 years that we've been doing this podcast. And the first 2 years in some was really just going through the major arcana. And then we've kind of branched out and done a lot of different things. And at certain points, we've had the stay or go. Do we keep doing this? It is its own thing. It has a life of its own. And I think both of us respect that. And each of those times where we're like contemplating maybe just shutting it down, some things happen that are like, no, it is not time. Like, it's clear enough to us that we're like, all right. But, and that happened again really recently and more strongly for me because, you know, for the last couple of years, I've kind of had the reins of the podcast, pretty much doing most things stem to stern. And I just came to a point where I was like, it's not right for me anymore. Yeah, I'm pal, as we say here. I'm done. And so, yeah. And then you, Sara, were like, okay, but wait. And then I'll just hand it off to you to kind of explain where you went with it.
That's right. Well, I could first of all empathize with you because years ago, after we transitioned from doing the major arcana exploration, which was basically you and I starting out in a closet, pressing record and talking about each major archetype, in the major arcana. And I've been through some crazy stuff in the past 5 years, that with that life transition, I could not handle a major role in the podcast. And I was extremely grateful and deeply impressed with what you did running with it, doing those interviews, exploring the world through archetypes and through tarot. It just knocked my socks off every single time. So I could empathize with you when you now have come to this point where, how many people are you marrying in May?
I think I have 15 weddings in May.
You have 15 weddings in May, and I know you're going to be doing some amazing work, campaigning and working on this next presidential election. And
Go Bernie, just saying.
And I think you're doing amazing things, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's time. Maybe it's time we pack this up. And, after sleeping on it and letting it percolate and realizing how much has happened with this podcast and how much is happening now in just some personal work that I've been doing with readings, I realize it's time. This is my chapter to take this over and really explore real life questions from our listeners, from people who have requested readings, and to explore them through readings so we can really look at questions, what we're all facing, and archetypal answers that can come up in tarot imagery. So I'm really, really excited about this new chapter. It's going to be like Story Hour with Sindera, Archetypal Podcast. I hope we can get you. I hope we can get you on here as well, Julianne, from time to time, as you feel moved. So yeah, that's basically the gist of our big turning point.
So, question, and just this, I think I want to know more about what you're doing, because both of you and I both done readings. Mine have been super limited, occasionally for friends, but I offered patrons a reading at the beginning of the new year. I think it was the new year anyway. And a handful of patrons have taken me up on that offer. So, and for me, it was really, I just wanted to say thank you and kind of exercise my chops in reading, but I wasn't doing tarot. I was doing the Hawaiian mana cards because that's the strongest energy for me. But I want to know, so what is the process, not your process, but what would be the process for, say, a querent, somebody to come to you with a question? Do you have that sort of laid out in terms of a process, or is it more free form?
I have a pretty good idea of what we can do at this point. So basically, if you are a patron supporter, our Podbean patron supporter at any level, so you could be the $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, $20
a month.
10. Don't forget the chariot. At any level, you may ask one question. You can send it to me. I'm going to be getting access to that Archetypal Tarot email again. Mm-hmm. And you can ask any question, and I will do a reading. And basically what a reading looks like with me is to use my very own deck, the Story Through Stone reflection card deck, which does have parallels, by the way, to the archetypes of the major arcana of the tarot. So that will be in there. And I write a story based off your question and the cards that come up. So it's rather folkloric in nature. It feels kind of like a little mini myth that is written specifically for you and only for you. And that story will be seen as a metaphor, as a metaphorical answer to your question. And we'll be exploring that on each podcast, one a month, which will have the question. You can be anonymous, of course. You can have a first name, maybe a location, so people know where you're from, and then the story and the interpretation of that story. So I'm so excited about this.
Me too. I like this. And so I mean, I think anonymity might be important to more than a few people, not all, but so you could just say L from the Western Hemisphere and just make it that sort of for the public to know, to make it as sort of private as possible. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can join at any time, at any level, as a supporter, and get basically a free reading as part of that with all of our other perks, which I'm going to have to learn from you how to keep my word to all those perks that our supporters get. Every
Well, and
month.
we might change them a little bit, but I still have lots of our cool postcards and things like that. So. Wonderful. I hope people are psyched about this. So essentially, the podcast will be once a month. It will be based on a reading, and all of those readings will be coming in through our patrons. So it sounds like our current patron group kind of get first dibs, right? And
Absolutely.
so let's just say you got 20 questions in a month. What do you think that might look like?
Well, I did notice that on some of your offerings that there's additional podcasts that our patrons get to listen to only exclusively. So that might be an option there. Also, I think I'll definitely do readings for every one of our patrons who ask. They may not all be
on the podcast.
Be on the podcast. So I want everyone to be guaranteed a reading. It just may or may not end up on the podcast. It'll depend on time and a number of factors.
Awesome. I love it. No, I love it. And as we all, I mean, both of us know, there are the plans you make and then there's what actually happens. So it sounds like you've got enough structure to get things going and then just see how things go. See, there's what you want and there's what wants you. So, and the relationship therein is really how things go. So I love it. So patrons can start thinking about what questions they might have, and
I think it might also be important to share what makes up a good question. And there's a number of suggestions to that, but basically you want the question to be open-ended. It often starts with something like, what can you tell me about? And these are questions that are going to explore possibilities in your life. They're not like questions that science should answer, like, am I pregnant, or things like that. So we're exploring major life themes in an open-ended way that can be answered by a metaphor. So it's really not going to be yes or no questions and things like that.
As is frequently the case.
Right.
We want to be reassured, but the story aspect of what you're doing is, I think, ultimately more satisfying and kind of has a longer shelf life. I know it's like a weird metaphor, but they're more nutrition packed, and I think ultimately we can get more out of them, which is why when I do readings, I just do essentially 2 cards, but it's one symbol card, one mana card, and then one house card from the 12 houses of astrology. So like that one provides focus, and the other provides the story. So how do you apply what exists in this house card to the story in this other one? And
and I think the ones that will make sense in a podcast the story aspect is important because I think that they can apply to more than just one individual. They'll be interesting and fun to listen to, even if it's not your question. So that's my hope and gear towards this idea for the ongoing podcast. Noting the fact that we'll be using the Story Through Stone reflection cards. So we're using natural imagery from billion-year-old stones from Death Valley that my father found in the 1970s. But it's opening up larger conversations around archetypes in nature, imagery in nature, and the idea that we can connect not only to our own questions and each other through card readings and these types of readings, but also to our relationship with the larger natural world. And I love the themes that can come up there. And I know that where you are living now and the life that you are living now and the work that you're doing, a lot of those themes tie in as well. So I hope that that will be an ongoing conversation point for us in the future.
Yes, and asking the stones to, you would in a way hear in Hawaiian, the deeper Hawaiian culture, and in addition to pretty much all indigenous cultures, be they Western, European, Eastern, the ones that I'm familiar with, and more specifically with island indigenous cultures, they're your ancestors. So in a way, when you're asking the stones, you're asking your ancestor. So we all came from, it depends on who you ask it, like sets of star systems or from one, but like the ultimate crawling out of the ooze, we are made of everything. We are, you are in a sense when you're working with a stone or something, you are related to it. That is your ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that connectivity, the recognition of that connectivity, the recognition of your relationship, and that we have to come back from this place of paving over our ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
for, the relationship to, and it's just remembering. It really is a matter of going far enough back in your own psyche to remember that you're connected and that it's not separate. It's not something you own. It's not something that you necessarily sell. You're related to it. You're inextricably connected to all of it. And
Absolutely.
Everything has life. Everything, as they say here, has mana. So
that's a beautiful thing you've mentioned about the ancestors, and that's also what I'll be doing for every reading for those who inquire. Before I actually pull the cards, it's an important part of the reading process to set that sacred space. And setting that sacred space means, first of all, relinquishing all the mind stuff of doubt and fears that always kind of come up with that sense of mystery before you do a reading. So there's the relinquishing of that. And then there's the welcoming in of lots of love, first of all, and compassion for the question that's coming up, to really feel it in my heart. And then welcoming in the highest good and the ancestors of the person who's asking, that have your best good in mind as we ask and do this reading. And it makes an amazing impression on the reading so far that I've experienced. I'm really excited to share that with our listeners.
I love it. This sounds like the perfect transition for the podcast. I hope our listeners will be as excited about this. It's something new. It's springtime. We are giving birth to something new. And Cinder's having the baby this time.
It's time. It's time.
It is time. Now I feel like I need to be in the father role of teaching you, or even the auntie or the grandmother, to be like, here's how you produce a podcast. Here are the 19,000 steps you need to take to make sure it all happens.
Totally. I have no idea what I'm getting into.
And I'm giddy at being able to hand it to someone else for a while. So
Great. Well, yeah, we welcome your thoughts and a lot of your compassion as we make this transition. But yeah, absolutely, any feedback you have along the way, we would love to hear it. Yeah, we'll be exploring so much. I'm very, very excited.
Wonderful. Well, as always, there'll be at the end of this podcast how to get a hold of us, how to connect, how to become a patron. And so, yes, I think people should do that, don't you?
Absolutely. I need to learn how to put that part at the end of the podcast.
Young Padawan, I will show you.
Great. Well, I do hope we'll find ourselves in conversation again on this podcast soon-ish.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
and great things to come will be connected.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm always here to support you. You know that.
Oh, thanks, Julianne. I have that on record here.
It's been recorded. Fake news, fake news. I'm kidding. Oh my God. All right, you guys. Well, a hui ho and malama pona, which is until we meet again, take good care. Say bye, Sandera.
Goodbye, listeners, and hello in our ongoing encounters.
Thanks for listening. You've just heard about our transition to a reading-based podcast with Sandera, and I bet you're excited to get a reading of your own. So, if you're already a patron, easy peasy. Just send Sandera your question by email to tarotpodcast@gmail.com. If you aren't a patron yet, well, what are you waiting for? Just go to tiny.cc/tarot to sign up, or Google Archetypal Tarot Podcast and land yourself on our podcast site. It's super easy to sign up, and you'll receive so many cool patron bonuses for less than the price of a cappuccino. So, go ahead and do that. We look forward to hearing from you. And as always, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Tarot Podcast. And big thanks to our current patrons, Sara, Geneva, Richard, Peter, Rash, Alli, Yvonne, and K. Your support makes all of this happen, and you make us smile every day. This podcast is produced by Both And Media, and theme music is by The Lunar Group. Until next time, aloha.